Councillor Adams an email?
Yeah, please.
We're now live on YouTube, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting. I'm Councillor Paul Skinner, Leader of the Council and Chairman of the Cabinet. Before the meeting starts, please can I remind all of those in attendance today to comply with the COVID regulations. Thank you. Now we move on to part one of the agenda, the plenaries. Have I got the Cabinet's permission to sign the minutes of the meeting from the 12th of May 2021?
Point please, Leader, is to do with the minutes, because if one reads them, this is pertaining to the decision to have a community governance review. If one reads the summary there, it seems to indicate everybody was massively in favour. I just want to point out that I was massively not in favour of it because of the cost of £10,000 for this community with governance review, and the fact that there's going to be a lot of officers' time involved, much precious officers' time in dealing with it. That's on page 2 of the minutes. So I just want to be clear on that. Thank you.
That is the BTAC item. That is for BTAC to deal with and not this council.
Okay, in that case, but
Thank you. Are we in? Okay, then I will sign that. Thank you. Are there any apologies, Pippa?
There is apologies received from Officer Michelle Sachs, Deputy Chief Executive for Police and Monitoring Officer.
And the Cabinet wish you well. Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any interest in any items on the agenda? Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the public? I'm only aware of one, Pippa.
Yeah, there is only one for you, Chairman, from Mr. Darren Abbott.
Can everybody speak into the microphone so we can hear? Can people speak into the microphone so we can hear?
Right, I will read out the following. Please could you let me know how I apply for an exemption from being issued a penalty notice for fly tipping or littering by Boston Borough Council or any of its associated agencies? I will answer that, and the answer was actually constructed by an officer, but it is no different from what I would give. Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Here is my answer. Thank you for your question. There is no exemption process from being issued with penalty notice for fly tipping or littering. The council adopts a proportionate approach to enforcement. Thank you. I don't believe we have a secondary.
Chairman, I received an email with a supplementary. I'll read it out. The answer seems to confirm that some of the residents of Boston are more equal than others. By this I mean it appears it depends who you are. So if you are an employee of the council or a friend of an officer, you do not get fined. But if you are Dorothy of 91 of Park Road and you leave a sleeping bag next to a recycling bin, you do. Is that correct? Isn't it discrimination? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that. From my perception, there is no discrimination. Everything, as far as to my knowledge, is dealt with in a fair and a proportionate manner. And I believe there were some labels spilled out, and I believe an apology has been issued. Thank you. Right, we'll now move on to part 2. Are there any recommendations from the overview and scrutiny committees for this meeting?
Recommendations from scrutiny are contained within the reports on today's agenda, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any recommendations from BTAC?
There are none for this meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the main part of the agenda, and I will move on to item 3, which is a new item 3. It will deal with the Welcome Back Fund and the delegation to spend. Do you want to lead this one, Nigel? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The council applied for and was successful in £62,811 of Welcome Back Fund. The fund was to approve activities and form Boston's proposal for the Welcome Back Fund includes various things around the town to boost the look and feel of the high street by investing in the street, planting, parks, green spaces, seating areas to make high streets welcome, to run publicity campaigns and prepare to hold events that will boost footfall and encourage people back into the high street and therefore support local business. We're looking at installing and refreshing signage and floor markings to encourage social distance and safety and improve green spaces on the high street, among other things. A full list of all the things that we're looking at is in the report. And the recommendation for this evening is that delegated authority to spend the funding in accordance with the proposed activities to the Assistant Director of Economic Growth in consultation with the portfolio holder of Economic Development and Planning. The report is quite detailed, and I'm sure we've all had a chance to look at that, but I welcome any questions from the committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Jonathan.
This question may be more appropriate for Lillian to answer. Lillian, I noticed that this is originally European Regional Development Fund monies. I was intrigued because we're no longer a member of the European Union, aren't we? Or is it something that's completely separate from the EU? Because I noticed the EU flag appearing, for example, on the back where we've got the authorisation where our proposals have been accepted by MHCLG.
Are you happy for me
Can we allow?
that? This funding is from ERDF. It's what's remaining within that particular funding stream, and it has been allocated through the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, specifically to support the reopening of the High Street following the impact of COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. Second point, I was pleased to note on page 7 that, and I quote, applicants should note that procurements will be tested in detail during the lifetime of the project, and that it remains the responsibility of the authority to make sure that all procurements are compliant with the ERDF procurement requirements. So that was good. The other thing I want to ask you is about, there's a list of, on pages 8 and 9, of commitments. I just wonder, is that a definitive, is that a final list, or can it be amended? Because it's quite specific in terms of the amount of the contracts and what they're particularly used for.
So the detailed proposed activity, which is detailed on pages 8, 9, 10 and 11, that is the project proposals that have been approved by the team at MHCLG. And in line with the approval, we have to ensure that we spend according to that profile. So, for example, item 2, which is around communications and public information activity, we have highlighted what we intend to spend the £8,000 on within those bullet points within that report. And therefore, we have to follow that proposal to be able to draw down that allocation of funding from MHCLG. So the proposals were submitted on the 28th of May, and on the 21st of June, we've had our approval from MHCLG in line with those proposals that are highlighted within that table.
Thank you, Lydia, for clarifying that. Thank you. No more questions.
Lydia, I thank the team very much for the dedicated effort in this short space of time. All these things are very, very prescriptive, and you have to be very careful on what you apply for in order to get the monies in. And you've been extremely successful. Nigel, bring you in there.
Yeah, I just want to say that when you put these applications forward, then you are looking at indicative spending and what you think you want for particular projects. And if you look at the top left box on page 8, it says anticipated value of the contract. Once that's gone through and it's been approved, then obviously now detailed spend will be done and sent to MHCLG for approval as we go through that process. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Martin.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So it's more a comment. Obviously, yeah, I'm greatly appreciative to MHCLG to give us £62,811. And yeah, I completely think that it's down to the hard work and dedication of our officers who work for us. So all props to you guys. The only thing I find slightly disappointing, and it's nothing we can directly impact other than to hopefully complain about it and MHCLG listen, is that the purpose of the funding is to encourage tourism and local trade following the devastating impact of the pandemic. And we're all aware that realistically, a large, and again, I appreciate the fact that we've been in receipt of some large grants to cover funds lost. But to my mind, it'd be really useful to receive an extra fund so that we could, maintain free car parking, or so that we could, really work on some of the issues that have been compounded on over lockdown. And I know we have our separate plans, and I know that we don't have the money to maintain free car parking or really clamp down as much as we'd like to on some of the other issues, including fly tipping, that we're facing in town. And again, it's no detriment to our officers, because I know they work extremely hard bringing in every available pound that we can, and we do really well on applying for grants. So it's more a plea to MHCLG to increase pots of funding, so that, because it won't just be us, there'll be many other towns across the country that are facing similar issues, and additional pots to bring back business into the high street would be more useful. I appreciate that that's not what we could apply for. So yeah, I am grateful for this money, but just thought I'd make that point.
Thank you for that. Nigel.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The department does lobby government very robustly, and any pots of money that does appear, we do put very, very good bids in, as you know. So we will continue to debate with government and MHCLG to make sure that we can apply for everything that we're entitled to. And anytime any bid is there, our officers are there right at the front door, banging really hard.
And this also, just to make a point on there, this cabinet has supported the local car parking to the maximum that we could have done. Yes, Richard.
I'm very pleased that we've received this money. That's good. We have a large a large proportion of our population are foreign nationals, and clearly we need to communicate very clearly with them on some of these issues. I am advised that social media is probably the mainstay of their communication system. And if we need to get a message across, short 1 minute videos are probably more effective than many other things. So I'd like just to bring this to your attention at this moment of time.
Thank you, Richard. We, as a council, we're really innovative. We have community leaders sessions which reach out, and we're being quoted as good practice. So it's always nice, but all suggestions are always there to bring forward. Nigel.
Thank you again, Chairman. Page 2, area of scope number 2 says communication of public information, and the specific activities that we'll undertake are explore platforms such as radio, social media, digital media, local and wider press, websites to reach audiences both within and outside the borough with creation of video content, still photography, sound bites, advertising campaigns to support the safe reopening of High Street in line with guidance, etc., etc. So that is something that is in the bid, which I'm quite proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you want to propose recommendations? Okay, then I will second them. All in favour?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Trace, I didn't see your hand.
That's okay. I'm kind of tucked over here. I just want to say I'm quite pleased of this funding that we do have, because sometimes with the bigger funding for the bigger projects, it's the small things that get missed. And this is made up of nice little small things that people do see, do notice, and will make a difference. So I'm very pleased at that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't pick your hand up. I'd looked at Richard and I didn't see. So we propose second. Everybody in favour? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to item 4, which is the Rough Sleeping Future Service Delivery. Starts on page 7 of the agenda pack. Councillor Griggs will present. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't intend to go through the report. We've gone through it in briefing. We've talked about it. I'll just give an overview of the summary and the recommendations and the reasons for those. So the government's committed within its rough sleeper strategy to halve rough sleeping by 2022 and to end it by 2027. As part of this, a funding programme known as the RSI has been launched, and we've received money again to provide a service that we currently provide. There has been some slight changes though. So we've been really lucky in terms of the Everyone In during COVID was really good for us getting people off the streets. And I think it's the following page of the report. Yeah, page 9 of the report. It shows our rough sleepers this year, and that number is extremely low. That being said, we're under no illusion that's because we were benefiting from money that we wouldn't normally have to provide a service that we can't normally provide. So whilst it's a big decrease, that in no way says, oh, we're super successful, we can take our eyes off the ball. We need to continue working with people like we currently do. We need to continue expanding the services where possible and making sure that we receive the best outcomes for our residents. So generally, the reason for this report is the way in which we normally provide the service can't be procured again and follow. So we extended it for a year and we have to legally go out to tender again to continue the service with P3, especially as there's now other people in the locality that offer similar services. Unfortunately, MHCLG announced the funding for us rather late in the day, which means that actually if we went out to procurement, we wouldn't be able to maintain the service continuity. There'd be a gap in service, and obviously that's what we don't want. So the recommendations are to bring it back in-house. So again, if we look at the other options considered, we can't look at maintaining existing arrangements because we're not able to under procurement rules. Carry out a full tender process isn't viable either because, as I said, we'd have a break in continuity of the service. And again, the other option considered is to not deliver rough sleeping services. I think we'll all agree that they're an extremely useful service. That being said, obviously the plan is to bring them in-house, and the proposed arrangements are shown within the report to continue from the 1st of July 2021, and they're considered the most appropriate in order to maintain service delivery and ensure a continued focus on reducing and preventing rough sleeping across the borough. One thing I will also say is, having read the report prior to it being published, and you read, oh yeah, it was an autumn evening when we went out and did the rough sleep account. And for anyone who isn't aware, it's when every authority across the country does it. That way it gives a good snapshot of everyone out in the UK at that particular time. It most definitely was not a pleasant autumn evening. It was freezing cold. The officers who work for us were out, P3 were out, the police were out. I also went on there. And again, it's not just a case of wander around looking in hot spots at 10 o'clock at night. It was, go out at 2 in the morning, stay out until, I think I finally went home at about 11 in the morning, and go around and try and find and help as many people as you can, or signpost people to services. So I think it's probably representative of, I'm sure there were people out there we didn't find. Unfortunately, you're not going to find everyone regardless of how long you're out. But I think it is representative of how many people roughly we had out. And P3, through their work in the community, were aware of additional ones who we know are generally rough sleeping, but we couldn't find that evening. So, yeah, it's a really important, crucial service. And I think it's really important that we maintain continuity of the service because, as we all know, especially with entrenched rough sleepers, some of the issues they faced make it difficult to overcome and difficult to engage. And once you've got the engagement, you don't want to lose it due to a break in service and reset progress back to the beginning, because that then potentially either means they're not going to be able to be helped and get off the street, or it means that their progress is going to be knocked back to a sufficient amount. It has a detrimental impact to them. So following that, I would like to propose the recommendations as in the report and looking for a seconder.
Do we have any questions? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's to do with procurement. Clear, are the normal procurement rules being obviated or bypassed because I've made notes on this earlier, Martin, and I was quite what it says, the council must be cognizant of its duties to comply with its contract procedure rules. Arrangements with a voluntary sector partner have been extended previously. There is not a compliant basis on which to extend the arrangement for P3 for a further period without a procurement process. No contract shall be extended more than once without being formally re-tendered. And the funding period 1st July 2021 to 31st of March 2022 does not provide for time to go through a procurement process. The values involved would require a full tender process. And you said, Martin, no service continuity, so procurement rules cannot be followed. So we've got a deal, haven't we, with Centrepoint Outreach, which is the council in the position to top up this core grant using RSI funding. The core grant top up will be 24,187 for the period 1st of July 21 to 31st March 2022. So just in summary, are we clear that we couldn't follow our normal procedure rules because there was going to be this break in service continuity? So we've kind of ignored them or bypassed them.
We've not bypassed them. So the way it works is P3 provide the service to us at the moment. We extended the service contract with P3 as we were able to within the remit of procurement rules. Yeah. However, as we've already extended it once, we're not in a position to extend it again without going to procurement. We got the funding notification really late in the day, which meant that to go out to procurement, there would definitely be a break in the service. So we could go out to procurement, or essentially the choices are go out to procurement and there's a break in service because we can't finish procurement before this contract ends, or we bring the service in-house, which means we don't have to go out to procurement because we're providing the service, and that maintains continuity of service. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Noble.
It does. So, and the deal with still pertains with Centrepoint Outreach?
That's a separate deal.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? Richard?
Just a comment to say that continuity of service is a very important element to this discussion.
I'd just like to comment that there might be all statistics, but behind these statistics, each individual has a story, and some of those people during this time have actually been able to reset their lives and move into employment and into accommodation. So we've been very successful from their point of view. So they're things that show success as well. So it's been proposed, it's been seconded, all in favour. Thank you. Right, item 4 is empowering healthy communities. And it's the Council Grant Scheme, which starts on page 13. Councillor Griggs, will you present? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's kind of ironic that 2 reports ago I was complaining that MHCLG should give us more money, and yet this report's here on the basis that they gave us more money. So again, I do appreciate all the hard work our officers do. And again, this is a prime example of quick turnaround. Our officers liaised with lots of external organisations and bodies to get a grant in a very short space of time, and we were fantastically successful at bringing the money in. So, yeah, again, all credit to our officers. They really do work fantastically well for us. But this is covering specifically the councillor grant scheme. So, again, I'm not going to go through the report in huge amounts of detail as we've already discussed it, but I will give an overview. So it's proposed to deliver a councillor grant scheme as part of the MHCLG funding Empowering Healthy Communities programme. £1,000 would be available to each member and £1,000 would be available to each parish council. The scheme would open for eligible applications between the 1st of July 21 and 31st of July 22. The recommendations as they are on the paper, there's just a few points that I want to make. So on page 21, first of all, there's a spelling mistake. It should say bank transfer instead of back account rather than it should say bank account. It also has a list of eligible and ineligible organisations that are listed, and it does highlight some interesting points. So generally speaking, the way the grant works is it's not just a case of, oh, here's £1,000, go play with it. It's about providing outcomes that fit in with the programme as a whole, which are listed on the 21 to 22 of the report. But the eligible and ineligible list also provides information that accountable bodies that have a constitution and are not for profit can offer to be the accountable body if there was an individual who wanted to run a particular scheme that helps achieve the outcomes required, but isn't a non-profit or doesn't have a constitution. So by no means does that mean that, you know, it is super prescriptive in what can and can't be given funding. It's potentially just how and what the outcomes are. One thing I will say is this puts a lot of onus on members, and I think that's a good thing. You know, we quite frequently get slagged off for not engaging with our communities, and I think this hopefully will show both members and members of the community that, you know, either that they are engaged to a good level within the community or that they need to pull their finger out and become more engaged in the communities. Because the way it works is organisations will apply for a grant to their council member, and again, it doesn't have to be one specifically, it can be multiple. Grants are up to £1,000, and they don't have to, they're not capped at one particular grant. So if an organisation comes up with two different ideas, they can apply for funding twice, but only in £1,000 tranches. But it really does put onus on the local member to ensure that they're, you know, liaising regularly with these organisations, that they understand the schemes. We then make the decision as to whether we feel that it should be supported. It then goes to our grants team, who look through the specific details, make sure that it does fall in line with policies, procedures, outcomes. The groups are constituted. So they do a lot of the legwork, but it means that we really have to be on the ball to make sure that we're getting word out there that this grant scheme exists, and that we're on the ball in terms of making sure that we're responding quickly to any problems or answering any questions or finding answers to any questions we have. Generally, the way it works is once the grant's approved, they've got 2 weeks before it's paid, once it's been accepted, which again is really, really crucial, because what we don't want is communities going, we want to do this. Yeah, no worries, your funding is going to take 4 months, because by then, you know, opportunities are lost and people can't provide the fantastic services that hopefully this is going to empower us to do. Again, if there's still onus on us to keep track of what's going on in the community. So somewhere within this report, and forgive me, I can't remember what page it's on, it tells us about if we choose, or if a project falls behind schedule, because obviously we're well aware these things happen, and we said that the schemes have to be delivered within a certain time period. Obviously that doesn't take into account the time for delays. We all know that projects can run over, and if there's a small delay and it's through no fault of the organisation, then that will be allowed within the scheme. However, if schemes aren't going ahead because, and I'm sure that this hopefully won't be the case, because lack of organisation or anything from organisations that are running it, then it's on the local member who, you know, let that grant go forward to chase that up and say, you know, what is going on, report back, because potentially they will have to pay the money back so that it can be used for other schemes. And obviously we don't want to find ourselves in a position where the deadline's passed, we can't give it out to anyone else, and now we're collecting half the money back from schemes that haven't been delivered. So again, it's really, the onus is on the local member to make sure that they're going out doing as much as they can. I think that's about it really, because again, I'm not going to go through everything that's in the report, but I am happy to take any questions, and I propose the recommendations as on the report.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this might be an appropriate time to say this, that when we bid for money and when we get these grants, they're for specific things. They're not just money that we as a council willy-nilly decide what we spend on. So, you know, recently, what have we got? Towns Fund, Levelling Up Fund, Welcome Back money, homeless prevention money, council, the Empowering Healthy Community money, excuse me, I've got a bad throat today, and various other things. But every one of them schemes, every one of them bids is very, very detailed criteria in what the money can be spent on. So, you know, we get grants for hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds. We can't just spend them on what we want. We have to spend it on specific things that are within the grants. And it just, again, shows that just how productive our officers are in applying for these grants, because if they're not applied for, we don't get them. And this is an absolute amazing scheme where communities can be empowered to do things. It's going to encourage members to get involved in their communities. And I just think it's an absolute amazing thing that we've got some money that we can support some of the most amazing volunteers in this town.
And I'll second it.
Thank you for that. Jonathan?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say I think it's a really well drafted and produced report. It's very, very clearly written. I think it's an excellent idea. I think there's plenty of time to apply because according to the summary, the applications can be received as late as 31st of January 2022. So there's plenty of time for that. I was very pleased what Councillor Grigg said about it's all about providing outcomes which fit in with the programme. I thought the section on who and who cannot apply, which you mentioned, Councillor Grigg, eligible and ineligible, was very, very useful. Interesting to note, for example, that schools can apply, providing it's for the benefit of the wider community and not just the students. But this is the key point. How are potential applicants or eligible groups going to be made of the scheme? Are we going to make it completely dependent on councillors contacting what they think might be various groups, or is there a way we can disseminate this information to likely groups who might well benefit? Because I think that's actually key. The more we can spread the information about this scheme, the better.
Please do, Martin.
Yeah, if I may come back. So my understanding is, and I'm sure one of the officers here will correct me if I'm wrong, is that yes, there's onus on councillors to get out there because hopefully we all have the local knowledge of groups who don't necessarily engage with the council all the time. We will still go out for our regular media channels and announce it. Obviously, hopefully we'll get some news coverage from this evening. We also have a very competent grants officer who I'm sure will be liaising with her, with people that she usually does and saying, oh, this is available. Is there any way that people can be aware of it? And again, hopefully just coming back on a point Councillor Welton raised, as he said, we're really good at getting grants and they ask for specific things. And hopefully that will allow, this scheme in particular will allow members a greater understanding of what grants can be used for and why it's important that we stick to the
criteria.
Yeah, the criteria. So thank you very much, Councillor Noble. The criteria of the grants, and again, hopefully that will allow us to convey some of that to normal people out on the street. I for one will admit, until I became an elected member, there was so much that I thought I knew about the council and didn't. And you look and go, well, why are they spending money on that? It'd be really nice to spend it on something else. And with this being such a fantastic project in terms of, as Councillor Welton said, it allows us to really help the volunteers that provide so much already and out of their own pocket or aren't able to provide as much as they'd like due to financial restrictions. Hopefully that will allow them to provide the services that they want to provide and that benefits every member of the community in the borough.
Thank you. It's really a great opportunity. Richard.
As this is a brand new idea, I think it probably is more going to be quite challenging to make sure we get the message across to the parish councils who are clearly involved in this. And so I think they'll need 2, if not 3 reminders in quick succession, knowing that they don't meet all that often and it's holiday time as well. So I think we've got... the officers will need to be aware that parish council in particular will need the information giving to them more than once, and the timescales are pretty tight, aren't they? If we're going to get them properly informed and get them to the meetings that we need them at.
I would quite agree. We will need to work with them to get them to understand the criteria and also the timescales. Rob.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points to add. I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for ward members to really get involved in the local groups in their ward. I did hear a suggestion that actually the 30,000 value can be seen as being quite limiting. But I think what we often find is there are voluntary groups out there that are really active in raising funding and they just need that bit of extra match funding to enable something to happen. So there's every possibility when members engage with the local groups, the value of benefit that's realised is much greater than the 30,000 through this scheme. So I think the match funding element is probably something that members might be really interested in looking at when they decide how to distribute. Thank you, Chair.
Point well made. Yes.
Yeah, just coming back on the match funding, I completely agree with the Chief Executive. And I will just say, just for clarity, these grants don't require match funding. So if there is a particular scheme that anybody listening now knows of that doesn't have any match funding and would seek the funding, then please do apply if it's successful this evening on the vote. Likewise, councillors may request that you have some element of match funding. So match funding is always great, and as Rob said, it is really crucial that actually we're here to facilitate and enable groups to be able to deliver what it is they want to deliver for our local communities. I don't think we should interfere with that, and we should be here, as I said, to facilitate it, and hopefully these grants will allow it. But again, just to reiterate, match funding isn't required.
But they can use it for match funding as well, which is excellent. Anybody else? No, it's been proposed, it's been seconded. Everybody in favour? Thank you. Moving on to item 5, this transfer internal audit service, and it's Councillor Noble to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, you find this essentially on pages 41 to 43. It's all about the proposed transfer of our internal audit service. As you probably know, our internal auditors are currently linked to City Council, and the proposal is that we transfer that function to Lincolnshire County Council, LCC, to allow a greater level of resilience and consistency within the Alliance, because ELDC obviously currently use LCC as their internal auditors. And the reasons for proposing this change are essentially there on page 42. It is a requirement of the Accounts and Audit Regulations Act 2015 that a relevant authority must undertake effective internal audit. And it's thought that there's an increasing need for specialist audit capacity, especially with the areas of fraud and ICT. And obviously our existing internal audit team have a relatively small team to deal with that. So we're looking to develop and extend the range of expertise available. One of the other benefits, well, it will be a streamlined service. There'll be one set of personnel for both councils that PSPS has to deal with. There'll be combined oversight of the work with one principal officer responsible. So there'll be combined audit reviews. It should reduce the number of days per audit. There will only be one audit report and closure process rather than two. It will result in a small saving of around £3,000. That's annual saving. And obviously there's less pressure on PSPS as they only have one set of auditors to deal with. And the key point is that it should increase resilience. There'll be a larger team to mitigate against a loss of staff and sickness and so on. And the provisional date for the transfer is 1st of July 2021. So there you have the reasons for this proposed change. Happy to take any questions if you like. And other than that, I'll move the recommendation. Thank you.
Any question? Martin?
No question. I think it's a really clear set out report. I'm just happy to second that proposal.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Well, the county team have an excellent reputation for being thorough, so I think it's quite a good move for the reasons stated. So it's been proposed, it's been seconded. Everybody in favour? Thank you very much. We move on to, as printed on the paper, 6, which is the appointments to external organisations. I take it everybody's read the paper, and I will be progressing as such. The Cabinet makes the appointments to the external organisations indicated. Such appointments do hold good only while the appointee remain members of the Borough Council until the next annual general meeting of the Council, or until the appointment of their successors. Any questions on this? Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. Yes, just a question. I think I'm being nominated to be the patrol councillor, being nominated for this committee. And I noticed the committee meets annually in Westminster in London on the next meeting scheduled for the 13th of July. You probably don't know, so it'd be interesting to know whether that's a virtual meeting or Zoom can be used, or whether one has to travel down to London, in which case will my travel costs be compensated? That's all. It's a very minor point, but I'd just like to know if you do know, or if anybody else knows, perhaps Rob knows.
I'm sure you'll be compensated for your journey as financial portfolio holder. It would be an idea that we get to grips with what we can and cannot do. But normally, any of those costs are met for council activity, and I certainly can't see any reason why not. So I'm going to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Nigel. All in favour? Thank you. You get a trip to London, Jonathan. Thank you. Move. And we expect a report back. Yes, exactly. Moving on to, as printed, the next report is the Q4 report, Performance, Risk and Finance. Starts on page 51. I will say that I've read the report. Obviously, it's a report that, for things that have happened, I won't be making much comment other than we've been extraordinary circumstances, and I'll let Jonathan move on to his bit.
Okay, thank you. Now, the essential information I'm going to be referring to are going to be on pages 52, 66 and 77. I'll do it first with risk, because it's really very simple. Our two main strategic risks remain housing and the budget, and there's no change from what's been before. So I propose to say more about that. Let's take the first excellent bit of news that we are now looking at, for the last financial year, a £704,000 underspend. Now, it's proposed that we carry that forward into a COVID pressure smoothing reserve, because we may have budgetary pressures in the next 2 years, and that's a way of dealing with that potential problem. Breaking down to specifics to look at, and the performance figures essentially for my department are on 66, and everything's very favourable. The only things I'll highlight, obviously, we take council tax. The collection rate has been slightly less than we would hope. We were hoping for 96% target, and it's 94.23. But given the financial problems that our residents have faced due to having 3 lockdowns imposed on them, I think that's still a pretty good result. 1% equates to about £30,000. So business rates, a slight reduction there, but there have been so many reliefs award to local businesses that percentages are not really very relevant. Okay, let's talk about on page 77. Flip onto that. Okay, because here we have the draft position at the end. I'm just going to highlight 1 or 2 key points. For example, as you see that at the bottom, we've had tranches of COVID monies from municipal housing committees and local governments. That's 1.138 million, but we've also going to receive another 855,000 for lost fees and charges and sales. So that brings it to 1.993 million. And I'm just going to give you a couple of other figures, really. This is to a bigger picture, really, just so you know how helpful central government has been to this council during the last year. Total government monies this council has received for itself since the start of the pandemic is 2.20 million. So it's a really remarkable amount. And then we look at the amount we've received. This is for local businesses. Government monies the council received to provide financial aid to local business adversely affected by 3 lockdowns. That's 30.730 million. So the financial position is very, very healthy. I'm anticipating a quick recovery, provided we do not have any more lockdowns. Now, I'll give you one specific minor example. Parking income in April, May. Now, that was while we still had 1 hour's free parking. Yet our income from parking in May was virtually double what it was in April. And now that we have not agreed to continue with the 1 hour free parking. If subsequently we should face economic pressures as a result of government activity, we will be compensated for that loss of income by central government. So just to summarise, the key points and the recommendation I'm going to make are that we note this quarterly quarter four.
Can I just remind you, we're taking items 1 and 2 only, then moving.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I haven't gone. Thank you, Paul. So just to note that, and also the key point, we're proposing that we use this £704,000 underspend to be carried forward into a COVID pressure smoothing reserve to mitigate any possible problems we may face in the future or budgetary pressures. So I'm happy to take questions if there are any. I think we as members should be very pleased, considering the problems the country has faced and this borough has faced in the last year, that we're in a remarkably good position.
Thank you, Jonathan. I will just second that at this point, but Nigel indicated.
Yeah, I was going to second it, but I wanted to say that since Councillor Noble's taken over finance portfolio, I think he's doing a fantastic job and brings things to this cabinet that are very clear, very well understood, his vast knowledge of it, and the ability to relay the information that myself finds extremely difficult to absorb around the detail of finance has been a great help.
Thank you.
Yes, I would second that bit as well. Yes, Martin.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with the point Councillor Welton made. I'm not going to pick through all of the data in the report. Obviously, it's published so people can look. Just going to highlight, we all know what a blight fly tipping is, and lots of people are aware of how unhappy they are with the car parking car parking charges being reintroduced. So yeah, it was just to re-highlight the fact that we've lost £600,000 this year on car parking charges. And whilst I'm sure every member in this room at the moment would love to have seen them continue, it is literally a simple case of either we re-implement car parking charges or we cut other services. And I do appreciate that obviously this year we find ourselves in a fantastic position of having an excess in the budget. That's due to prudent financial planning and government compensating us for losses that we weren't expecting. We know that going forward we're not going to be in the same position, which is why, even though I don't like the idea of not reinvesting the money immediately, it's why I will be supporting the recommendation. And lastly, just in terms of fly tipping, as I said, we all know what a horrible blight it is. And if I just find which page it was on again, if we look at the fly tipping data in terms of collections, I think it does, and I could be mistaken while I'm looking for it, but it's approximately 88% of all fly tips are attended to within, 88% is the target. I do apologise, it's 92% of fly tips reported are responded to within 3 working days. So again, real credit to our staff considering the amount of fly tips we're getting. If we look at March, 377 fly tips in a month, that's 200 more than in the previous year. That's astronomical, and the fact that our guys are still managing to get there, and I know from having seen them out, sometimes they're attending the same spot 3 times in a day. So I think going forward, we as cabinet and we as a council need to focus far more on how we stop people doing it in the first place. And I know we try with our messaging, and I know we've got plans going forward to do stuff, but I really think the faster we can roll stuff out, the better. Because it is such a blight, and I think that ruins all the good work set out in Lydia's report and all the other reports where we're trying to do stuff and improve the town and bring people back in. When you look and you go, it looks grotty because people don't care, and it's always the minority spoiling it for the majority. So I think we need to really up our game in terms of that. But I just wanted to highlight what a fantastic collection rate it is, and would encourage anyone listening that if you see any fly tipping, please do report it. We can only pick up what we know is there or what we see, and unfortunately we can't be everywhere at once. So
that's an excellent point, and please use Fix My Street. The other thing with that is, while our staff is picking up this extraordinary amount of fly tipping, they cannot be doing the other jobs that we like to get them to do around town. Jonathan.
Yes, thank you. Just completely support what Councillor Griggs said. I mean, just interesting statistics about fly tipping. I mean, I notice here about the kind of vehicles that are primarily responsible and the numbers. I mean, let's take a small van. From April 19 to March 20 was 514 incidents. From April 20 to March 21 was 1,397. Transit van number of dumpings has almost quadrupled in the same period. So our teams, I agree, do a great job in trying to clear up this mess as soon as possible. I'd just like to come back also to the parking income. And people listening need to know that fees and charges probably contribute 17% of our total income, and parking itself is, we get £1 million from parking. It's a significant source of revenue for this council.
Thank you for that. So any more questions? No. So it's been proposed. It's been seconded. So that's recommendations 7.1, 7.2. Is everybody happy to support? Thank you very much for that. Jeanette, I think we need to go into closed session.
That's correct, Chairman. Appendix D of this report on page 79 contains confidential information relating to financial or business affairs. So can I ask members to exclude the public and press, by which you'd need to consider resolving that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Access to Information Variation Order of 2006, that the public and press be excluded from the meeting for this item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A of the order. If you
quite happy to propose that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. We'll move to closed session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I will stop the recording and